Welcome to Choosing Leadership, a podcast for leaders who refuse to play small. I am Sumit Gupta, founder of Tengen Partners. I am here because I see too many brilliant leaders trapped in daily firefights. Too many companies hitting walls that they do not need to hit. Too many people waiting for weekends instead of waking up every day excited to go to work. And very frankly, that is unacceptable to me. At Tengen Partners, we are an unapologetic call to excellence. This podcast is not about giving you more content. It is about shifting the context under which you operate. Because leadership is not a position, leadership is a choice. In each episode, I will bring you conversations with leaders who have made these choices, the uncomfortable ones, the courageous ones, and the ones that changed everything for them and their companies. And with that, keep listening and let's get started. Hi, Arthur. Welcome to the Choosing Leadership podcast.
Thanks, Sumit. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. You are the founder and the CEO of AlphaGamma, and now you are also starting AGC Wealth Management, right? So before we get into all of that, can you share for our listeners a bit of your backstory? And then we will jump into the meat of the conversation.
Sounds good. Thanks for the quick intro, Sumit. Yeah, so my name is Arthur Gopak. I'm indeed CEO and co-founder of AlphaGamma, which is a business portal for young professionals. We serve more than 4.5 million readers worldwide. We're also headquartered in Amsterdam, but we have an audience pretty much from all over the globe, including partners, also more than 500 authors. So we are an award-winning media outlet. So we got an award from Google Foundation for the contribution to the social cause that we're making. Then my actual background is actually in finance, but before finance, I used to work as a journalist at the age of 15. So I actually won a national essay competition, and I eventually got the opportunity to work for the largest newspaper of my home country, Latvia. And because Latvia is the country that I'm originally from, but for the past almost 16 years now, I've been living in the Netherlands. And I've never thought I would be actually running a media company one day. I do enjoy writing, and by winning different essay competitions, international contests, I thought, okay, I definitely have a talent at this. Though I realized fairly quickly, so when I got this job opportunity, I actually had first probation period of 3 months, and my second assignment was to interview the prime minister. And I would say that whole experience was like the school of hard knocks in a way. At the age of 15, you would probably not recognize me. I was really shy. I was not as outspoken. I wasn't as confident. And then I was given this task to interview the prime minister, and without the material, my probation would have been over right on the spot. I took that assignment seriously, and eventually I learned how it works, like to organize like a press meeting with the officials. I learned the protocols, and so eventually I was able to do it. Like that was probably the longest assignment, like writing assignment ever. So I started like from 8 a.m. to like almost midnight the same day, but I eventually delivered. And that actually, so that assignment kicked off my, say, media career. Yeah, it was because when I was still like a high schooler at the time, so I was studying at the gymnasium, and I pretty much, like, whenever I had an opportunity, I wrote for
Yeah.
that newspaper.
So did you actually interview the Prime Minister?
And it was actually perfect timing because he was in town and I was supposed to interview him regarding the topics related to why young people actually are emigrating. So at the time, it was fairly the time when the European Union had the largest wave of expansion. And because of this, more
Yeah.
European, like more new countries were
Yeah.
added to the bloc. And because of this, like more, and one of the problems of, say, of these countries, like new members, was that young people actually are seeking economic opportunities abroad. And because of this, yeah, like one of the topics that I discussed was, okay, like why it's happening, what can the country do, to bring young people back, and whether there are any prospects for young people to actually come
Yeah.
back. So ironically, I eventually was also like one of them. So it took me like about 5 years, but I eventually also ventured abroad, and I'm glad I did.
I will jump in, right? Because that's it's really because you also mentioned you were quite shy, you were like introverted or whatever when you were younger. Today you have one business, you are starting the second one, and you interviewed the Prime Minister, right? So was it that interview like that shifted something for you that you like sometimes life happens and you suddenly
Yes.
see a bigger future for yourself? or was it something else? Can you share, like, Arthur before the interview, Arthur after the interview? How were
Yes.
you different? How did you change?
Funny thing, like actually, I've never looked at it this way, but that's good that you mentioned because I keep on repeating this story. And at the time, it didn't feel like something profound. It felt like something that I was really excited to be working on. I really took it as a challenge, and that was definitely something outside of like my daily routine. And what I learned about journalism as such was that I was always looking forward to the next day, because one day I was interviewing the Prime Minister, the next day I was taking part in the like cyber games
Mm,
competition. Another day I took a ride on an air balloon. So the day after that, I interviewed some of the best musicians out there, and I actually loved that dynamic. It felt like a drug in a way. So at the time, I really enjoyed the experience in itself, and I was really on the way. I got fortunate by having mentors like my colleagues who were like 20, 30, 40 years into writing, into media, into journalism. So at the time, I was really learning from the best, and I kind of saw I saw the good and the bad of the media industry as such. And also, just to give a bit more context, perhaps, I used to work for the publishing house, right?
mm,
So that they had a portfolio of press, like of actually printed media. Right now, that's like now, like 21 years later, that's like dinosaur era, right? But at the time, I remember actually
yeah.
seeing this shift. I also thought, hey, like how come you guys are not releasing more like virtual content, like more online? And in the I must say that there was a lot of inertia in the industry and still is, but ironically, the publishing media hasn't disappeared entirely. So there is still, like, I would say there are still pockets of readers like who prefer reading like physical newspaper. But to me, I feel back then already I was at that like pivotal moment where I felt, okay, so that's great. And actually, I even had written notes from my fans. Like I started getting like real fans among my readers, and they were actually sending me not emails but written letters. And that was just crazy. Like I realized that over time that I started interacting with my own readers, like in a similar fashion, like we're interacting with our followers today. But at the time, it was like written experience. And I actually realized how much power like the written media has. So you can really project your opinion, you can really kind of express yourself, of course, but it definitely has the influence to
Yeah.
the external environment. And at the time also, I started feeling this when I got into it, and it took me a bit of time to really start feeling this. I would also say that, yeah, like that was actually great, like study experience in itself. And that was funny when I started working for that publishing house and then I had to return back to the classes. I really felt I realized how big the world is and how many exciting things happening outside. I was still at a school. And but I still had I had no other
Yeah.
option. So I graduated from high school, of course, but I already felt that experience raised me. Like I developed at such a high pace that I felt a bit bored
Mm.
at school later on. But
Thank you.
yeah, fast
Yeah.
forward, while I did enjoy the writing experience, I did have a lot of fun doing this. I met a lot of friends and contacts I'm actually interacting with until this day.
Mm.
But I realized that I actually want to be on the other side. Actually, funny, that's exactly what's happening now because I was actually thinking like that I have so many talents, I have so many cool ideas I want to work on and put out there into the world. And then I really want to be interviewed. It's not the other way around. I don't want to be the interviewer.
Yeah.
So, but it took me a bit of time to get to that realization. And eventually, there was a time when I was supposed to graduate from high school and I had to decide what to do. And a lot of people told me, "Hey, Arthur, you should definitely go and study journalism. You're good at it." So pretty much every single person I met, they
Mm.
already knew who Arthur Gopak was. But I was cheered as a writer, as a rock star journalist. But only one person, and I'm still grateful to that person until today, who told me that perhaps I should consider business. I should consider really pursue entrepreneurship instead. And I asked why. I said, because yes, you're good at writing, but you have far more than this. And that
Mm.
was a person who was one of my, say, teachers at the time. And I actually listened to that advice as well.
Mm. Yeah.
And that actually felt right. That experience taught me to really listen to my own gut feeling, regardless what the external environment tells you. Sometimes the external environment is wrong. And that was like, it kind of felt like going against the crowd within me, it felt right. And that was like probably the first time ever in my life. Actually, it was my second time. I'll tell you about the first time as well. But that was the second time when it felt that way. But the first time was, I remember when I didn't tell you this story before I actually started writing for the newspaper. 2 years prior, so at the age of 13, I became the editor-in-chief of the school's newspaper. And I actually joined it. I really thought that was so cool. Of course, the circulation was tiny. It was like 100 editions or so per month. But I remember I was actually working on the outlines. I was interviewing the killer kids in that school. And so I eventually created a format that was widespread among others. And it was actually interesting. So I learned that other people are curious about the other people, especially the ones that they see more often than others. They want to know more about their story. And eventually I came up with other ideas for the new formats. And at the time, I wasn't the editor-in-chief. I was like just a regular writer. And then I actually had so because I kind of felt maybe over eager to implement all these ideas, I had an eventual conflict with the present editor-in-chief. So I told her at the time that we're not moving fast enough with the current times, with what the audience wants, and without asking for anyone's permission, I just started implementing changes. So that old team. So what happened was, like, I think when I joined, there was like a team of 10 people. And then I eventually was the only person running it. So eventually it happened that the old team didn't share the same views as I did, and so I basically I took over. But what's funny that I made an announcement saying, "Hey, now we're expanding. There is a new, bolder vision, and a new team emerged." So, but I would say the excitement wasn't to the levels I hoped it to reach. Eventually, I got a few like-minded team members to join me. But what really changed was when I became the author of when I really started working at the newspaper. So that changed, because then there were like queues of people who wanted to really jumpstart the career in journalism and media. And they were still studying at the gymnasium, and they were knocking at the door because they really wanted to become one of the authors. They saw that as a door to that opportunity. That was the very first time, like, when I actually felt that no matter what, I have to do what feels right to me. And so that was like the big revelation at the age of 15.
Let's come back to today, right? What
Yes.
is it that today you feel is the right thing to do, that you feel in your guts, in your bones, that maybe the external world, people or data doesn't support, right? What is it that you are experiencing right now?
First of all, with emergence of AI, I can definitely tell that the SaaS as we know it is dead. So pretty much, like, all these AI startups that say, "Oh, we started overnight, we generated 400K in sales," we're not going to hear about these startups in 1 year from now. To me, whenever I hear a story like this, it means that whatever that team is building is not protected. Anyone can build it. And I think that's actually bad news. And that's why I would rather look at industries that can't be easily, the ones that can't be replaced by AI, but they can be really amplified. One of such industries I'm personally looking at is definitely finance, wealth management. And I definitely feel that the world of finance is not moving anywhere. And also it's quite, I would say, segmented. So I'm actually surprised. And one of the reasons why I'm starting my own investment management firm in Luxembourg is that I see that the current big players that deal with asset management, wealth management, like the established players, they still use the software developed in the last century. So also the entire infrastructure is very dated. And besides, for various reasons, they objectively can't change that overnight. So, but that creates opportunities for newer players. But for newer players who really know what they're doing, then the ones that really have the bold ambition to really build something big, and then the ones that have the trust and credibility. I would say the credibility factor is probably the most important in the industry. And that's one of the reasons why I started AlphaGamma, because before starting AlphaGamma, I was working on other fintech projects, but I actually created an investment fund. I was working on the investment fund, let's put it this way, about 12 years ago. And I was invited to join Startup Bootcamp fintech program at the time. But eventually, once it was about to go through the program, my business partner with whom I designed that concept couldn't participate. And I eventually had to carry out the concept on my own. Now, I realized that the biggest stumbling block for me was, aside from confidence and the network, was that I didn't have the visibility. I didn't have that credibility that I thought I had to convince big players, big investors, not even to invest, but just to have a conversation with me. So now it's completely different ball game, like I can tell you. So the fact that I built the media company, that I have this visible online footprint, like all of that plays a role. And also because I also have people vouching for me in the industry. And again, that was achieved because I was working in the media, and finance is one of the topics that we also cover at
Yeah.
AlphaGamma. So that allowed me to build that goodwill, if you will. So finance is definitely one of those long-lasting topics that are not moving anywhere, and they're not going to be replaced by technology. If anything, they'll be accelerated, but not replaced. Unlike all SaaS instruments that I can think of, the ones that I'm using at the moment, I definitely see lots of applications related to, say, construction or healthcare, or also agricultural sector, like the ones that have the physical, say, expression, like the physical application, and then they would be accelerated by AI. But right now, I feel that if anyone can build a software tool overnight, then to me it means that like, why would someone pay for a tool that someone can build overnight? So
Let me ask, you mentioned you used the word credibility, and right, you became an entrepreneur and that gave you credibility. You build a company, you build like credibility in the market with people. Let me ask you this, right? If you lost that today, if you don't have Alpha Gamma with you, like that association with yourself, but you retain the lesson, right? You retain whatever you
yes.
went through, but nobody knows that you started this. You don't have the company, it is gone just for one reason. What, or even who would remain, right? What would remain of you? Who would be the Arthur that remains if you don't have Gamma?
Okay, so expertise still matter. So you need to be an expert in whatever field. In my case, I studied finance. I worked in financial consulting, insurance, investment banking. Also, I participated in and won numerous finance competitions, investment simulation challenges. So I always kind of had this, say, curiosity about the industry. And I would say that whatever, say, industry someone picks, it's important to pick the one where you're excited the most, and of course the one where you see the most opportunities. For me, like, I would say finance is definitely one of those like areas. What I would do, like right now, is definitely the expertise that I retain. So if, say, I would be stripped out of the brand name, of the
Yeah.
visibility, and assuming I would have to start all over, I would look at ways to really get into those, like, into the environments where these decision makers are. And I personally realized that I'm pretty good at getting the word out virtually. In fact, I became very selective about what events I attend, like what kind of people I meet. I realized that just because you attend, say, a conference, and yes, you might have some interesting conversations, but it's not a guarantee these people will invest in you. Yes, these people might start spreading a good word about you, and sometimes it's worthwhile. But I feel that, at least in finance, it's worth attending in-person events when you already have substance. I don't feel that it's, at least in my case, since I'm raising capital for my investment fund at the moment, I want to attend those events once I already closed the first round. And right now
Yeah.
I'm able to, but I'm able to get these meetings virtually, and I'm able to get the decisions virtually as well. However, the in-person events would matter when you talk to, say, bigger, more conservative investors. And these type of investors, they would expect you to have, say, years of track record working on one concept. So they wouldn't be, yes, they're managing billions in assets, but they just having a good word about you, this wouldn't cut it. So,
Yeah.
and that's why showing up at their door, or just at the same event where they are, like, yes, like having good word, great reputation, track record, like these things will like matter like a lot.
Yeah.
So just being a good, like an expert at this, it's
Yeah.
like the bare minimum.
You mentioned a social cause somewhere in what you shared.
Yes.
Can you speak a bit more about the social cause and how does it
Yes.
connect to either Alpha Gamma or the fund investment that you will raise?
So AlphaGamma has actually started with this mission to also share opportunities that, say, Otherwise, people from underprivileged backgrounds or modest backgrounds, let's put it this way, they wouldn't able to come across them. And I would say I come from a modest background. I actually won scholarships to get all my education pretty much. I got all the job opportunities because I won competitions. And I would say so, but then again, it's unconventional. So I know this is not how things are done. Like most of the time, whenever someone wants to land a job, a person would go to a career website of any given company and would submit the application regarding the education. Most of the time, people save for like they work somewhere, they save the money, and then they pursue a specific degree. So I was able to bypass it by finding those opportunities. And these opportunities, not just they were not and still are not as like openly accessible and also visible. You need to know what to search for. And I kind of saw that information asymmetry, and I would say, hey, if there would be no readers of AlphaGamma, then I would be the reader of AlphaGamma, because I found a way to discover these opportunities, and then I publish those opportunities. That's actually how AlphaGamma started off as a blog. And then, of course, we ventured out into other topics, other, let's say, verticals, but that was like the core. So to share those opportunities with pretty much young professionals. And over time, I realized that yes, there are people coming from very different backgrounds, but they all had, I would say, shared profile that included being hungry for knowledge, for opportunities, being a self-starter, definitely being educated, or at least willing to pursue education. And by default, these individuals eventually achieved success in their careers. So, and these are the same people who eventually went on to start their own businesses, or eventually, once they start businesses, they would exit those businesses, and they would eventually start investing. And so AlphaGamma eventually evolved over time as well. So this, since we have the social cause, we actually were highlighted by Google Foundation. And that was the first organization, if not the only organization, that supports social cause and at the same time supports social businesses, because that's another story, by the way. So and I believe this is also one of the stumbling blocks why there are not that many social businesses. So there is very rare when there is something in between. So either there is a very for-profit venture that doesn't have a mission, or there is a non-for-profit. So, but the problem with non-for-profit is that you can't think in the same categories as a commercial enterprise. For example, because you can't keep the profit on the balance sheet, you're supposed to reinvest that or to pay it somehow as salaries. Basically, your profit should be zero. And so that already limits the stimuli for everyone who's involved in that NGO. Another thing is that you are heavily reliant on grantors, say foundations, family offices, or whoever is interested in supporting the social cause.
You mentioned earlier about that person who said that you should do entrepreneurship, right? You would be good at business. And that's a voice or feedback, right? That led to a big part of where you are today. I just want to ask on the other side of it, right? Has there been a feedback, or has there been a message that you have received often repeatedly that you have been slow to accept, that you have been resisting, or like you're not really adopting it?
That's actually a really good question. I would say that's something that I had to learn the hard way last year. Last year probably was the most brutal year in my entire career for many reasons. And one of them was that I had wrong assumptions about my business model. And I actually realized that I thought I was focused on just one business model. I wanted it to continue working no matter what, but I was ignoring the market feedback. I ignored what my colleagues told me. I ignored pretty much these external signs because I was only listening to myself. And I realized that at some point, and that was probably the only time, when I thought I was following my gut feeling. And I always thought, okay, yes, challenges happened over time. I always emerged stronger, better, wiser. Here, it was the other story. I was going through the challenges, but things keep on getting worse. And I realized that I actually had to look at it differently. And thanks to my wise wife, and I had to reconsider and accept the fact that if I wouldn't know, if I would already know how to achieve something, I would already get it. And that's why that whole experience made me much more, say, humble, grounded. I realized that, okay, there's lots of things I still don't know. And I always thought that I've never been, I would say, I've never been arrogant. I learned very early in life that arrogance leads to nowhere. But here it was more that I really was convinced. I fell in love with the business model. And I realized what it actually is. So it is a thing among founders. And it took me some time to accept that. And I eventually had to let it go. It wasn't easy. It sounds easy now as I'm talking about it, but most of the time you actually need to have not just great mentors. Sometimes you would need to consider doing psychotherapy just to understand yourself and what is it that you're feeling. So and since we're talking about gut feeling, understanding your own feelings matters a lot. I always thought all that so whenever someone talks about feelings, I always thought that's a sign of weakness, at least to me. But then again, I have the finance background. I worked in the industry, so that industry doesn't speak feelings. It speaks only logic, data-driven decision making. It doesn't accept and doesn't understand feelings. But now I actually see that actually lots of pretty much everything is driven by feelings and emotions. And so that whole experience allowed me to kind of look at more at feelings, my own feelings, what I really want. And eventually, but I kept on receiving those signs like for years. I kept on disregarding them in one way or another. But once I accepted that I probably don't know exactly what I don't know, I have to be more open-minded. I have to try out other things. I actually would have to let go of that business model, and the miracles started happening. The new type of projects, new type of clients. Now I actually have the hedge fund idea that I realized I kept on postponing it for a real long time, and now I feel it's the perfect time to start working on it. And I also see another, I would say, piece of advice that I could share with listeners is that one of the best ways to tell whether you should continue or discontinue something is that, say, it's fine to work on several things at the same time. So what worked for me and what really contributed the most to the realization that I should let go of the old business model was that I started investing more time into fund management. And I realized that every single minute that I spent on the investment management concept got a higher, say, payout, higher return than a minute invested in the old business model. And so sometimes you actually have to make that comparison and accept the fact that you should really go where the response is. Yeah. So even though you might have your heart somewhere elsewhere, you should kind of let go. Perhaps it works in a similar fashion in relationships as well. So if something doesn't serve you anymore, then you should probably let it go.
Yeah, so if given your dreams, given your ambitions, if I were to interview you 10 years in the future and you're
Yes.
looking back at today, you're looking back at 2026, you're looking at your calendar, you're looking at how you're spending your time, where would the future you say that you're wasting your energy today?
That's actually great. I would say that question alone is actually a great visualization technique. I've started using it since last year. And I would say that what I'm doing now, compared to even what I did at the beginning of this year, is already the right thing. So I started talking to the right people. I'm talking to, I would say, people who really admire the work that I'm doing. I really wanted to reverse the model where instead of me chasing clients, is the clients actually knocking at my door. That's exactly what started happening. It was happening previously, but I wasn't as perhaps I didn't articulate it that way. That's exactly what I want. I kind of was driven by the chase, and now I realized that you shouldn't be always rowing. And actually, one of my mentors, like a really wise person from the finance industry, told me, "Stop rowing, start sailing." So stop rowing, start sailing. And that really left such a profound impression on me that when you set sail, then you're relying on the wind. Now, how do you create the wind? You create the wind by reading the right books, by being the right communities in the right circles, being visible in these circles, being proactive in that environment. So this is how you set sail. instead of rowing where you chase every person individually, you do the things that feel like a drag. So instead of, they should be feeling like a breeze. But then don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean that you wouldn't be challenged. Of course you will be challenged, but it means that whenever you get challenged, you get a reward at the end of it. So if you don't get a reward at the end of the challenge, then it means that it's the wrong challenge that you picked.
About young professionals and impact earlier. When you
Mm-hmm.
see young people today, right?
Yes.
Especially given all the changes that is happening in business in our society, what conversation do you think that the current young professionals are not having, and that worries you, that your mind?
Yes, I would say that right now, I'm actually surprised that I encounter such individuals who are very skeptical of AI tools. I'm surprised to meet young people who are skeptical of personal branding or being visible on social networks. I feel that's right now that this is I think that right now young people have plenty of time to start building that capital. And I'm currently writing an article, what makes a wealthy person in 2026. And surprisingly, it's not money alone. In fact, it has moved lower in the ranking. So now one of the top assets that you can build is your personal brand. And how you build it is through online visibility. You leave an online footprint. How do you leave an online footprint? Being active on social media channels, that's one of the ways. But you can say, start writing blogs. You can start your own personal website. It costs peanuts to do it. And besides, you don't need to have millions of followers to be visible, to start getting lots of job opportunities, projects assigned to you. You need to be visible within your own industry, within the market that you're excited about. Funny thing is, I actually have a friend of mine, and she works at the International Criminal Court now. But I remember when, like about 13 years ago or so, she actually had a dream of working at that institution in The Hague. And I told her, why don't you write a book? And I said, why? Why? Who would read the book? I told her, trust me, the right persons will notice your book, and based on your book, they'll be coming at you. And that's exactly what happened. And also, just for the record, I also wrote a number of books. So I would say these are more like finance/investment manuals. But I would say that experience really works. And by the way, it doesn't have to be writing per se. It can be also like vlogging. So I know some people are great at creating video content. I'm still getting better at this.
One thing which I see as a thread in all of your sharings is you have constantly not waited for permission. You have just went out and did things.
Oh, yes,
Sometimes
exactly.
without experience or without being in the right set of people or anything like that, right? But one
Yes.
question which I would like to ask you is, like, what is one area where you are still waiting for permission? You have a desire, a dream, but you have not
Yes.
acted upon it.
That's a fantastic question. And now I have a really good answer for it as well. So I'm a member of one community. It's called the School of Mentors. It's run by a guy called James Dumoulin. You might know him. So he has content. He came up with this concept to go out there and interview rich people in the streets. And his channel is called the School of Hard Knocks. And I actually happen to know James through that community. And I spoke with him and like how to be confident. And he actually shared a quote that the world brutally penalizes shy people, like brutally penalizes shy people and handsomely rewards courageous people, like confident people. Like confidence, there is a saying, confidence is sexy. It doesn't just apply to relationships, but in general, like people get attracted to this. And I would say that you can't be shy, like in today's day and age. You have to be out there. And by the way, what's the worst thing that can happen? Two things. One, like you'll get a no, but if you don't ask, the answer is no anyway. So why not to give it a shot? Two, to be judged upon by your current environment. I would say this, like the current environment, is the biggest stumbling block. And I would say a lot of people are not willing to give up their current environment. And that's actually scary because, like, maybe in my own life, I realized that I've been changing social circles as I, was going after bigger and bolder dreams. And I realized that this is part of the process. You can't be you can't be holding, like I would say, clinging to certain people. You have to accept the fact that people come and go in your life, and those people who love you, who celebrate you, who want to be with you. So these people are the ones who you should spend the time with. But
Yeah.
then again, even then, you should be willing to let them go as well. I would say, at least that's the philosophy I stick to also in my personal relationships, that I admire my friends, I admire my wife, but at the same time, I know that life happens, priorities might change on their side, and so no matter what happens, that I'll trust my own path, and I'll keep on trusting my own judgment. So,
Yeah.
and I know that takes courage. The way I'm putting it, it's the work that every single person needs to do themselves. And I see, like, now that basically the quality of your life will be dependent on the quality of questions that you ask yourself. And I would say that, like, right now, young people have a huge advantage. Like, they're not burdened by legacy thinking, by legacy systems. Now, the good news is that there's no playbook.
Yeah. So we can keep on talking like this forever, but I would
Yes.
also like to close this out by asking from you, if anybody who is listening this episode, what is the best way for them to either find you or to find more about what you're up to?
Sure. So I have my own website, arthurgopag.com. I have all my social media channels there, so feel free to connect with me there. I'm probably most active on LinkedIn. This is where I also have the biggest personal following as well. And yeah, so feel free to reach out to me with any questions, with any suggestions to partnerships. I'll be happy to address as the time permits, of course.
I will share those links with the show notes. But as we wrap this up, I would like to thank you for the conversation that we have. Thank you for the story that, like, I think wonderful tidbits that you have shared from your past, from your experiences, and how that has shaped you into doing what you do today. And I think that was wonderful. Best of luck for everything that lies ahead for you.
Sumit, thank you so much. It was a great pleasure.
Absolutely. That's it for this episode of Choosing Leadership. Here is what I want you to know. You are capable of so much more than you currently think that you are. And that is not because I have all the answers. That is because I have lived it. I have gone from hiding behind a comfortable tech career to building companies, coaching CEOs, and standing for impossible dreams like taking India's volleyball team to the Olympics. So if this episode hits you, if it resonated with you, share it. Tag someone who needs to hear this. Tag someone who is currently playing smaller than you know that they are capable of. And if you are a leader ready to play the biggest game of your life, if you are ready to make those 100 million jumps, then reach out and let's talk about being a guest on this show. If you want to go deeper, visit tangentpartners.com or find me on LinkedIn. Once again, remember, mediocrity is a choice and so is excellence. I'm your host, Sumit Gupta, and until the next time, keep listening, keep choosing leadership.